You would open an anonymous letter? If she said she's watching you right now? What if she wasn't alone? What if behind a dirty envelope and angry handwriting, there was something much darker than just a threat? Something that knew everything about your life, your routines, your secrets, your family? That's exactly what started to happen in Circleville, a quiet town in Ohio, that until then was known for three things: silence, safety, and nothing exceptional. But everything changed when disturbing letters began to appear in the mailboxes of ordinary residents. And when we say disturbing, we're not talking about random hate messages. We are talking about letters that knew too much, intimate details, things that no one should know. Imagine receiving a handwritten letter telling you that your daughter is in danger, that her husband has an affair, that if you don't do what they're told, something horrible is going to happen. These messages didn't just accuse, they watched. They promised punishment. They controlled it. This case, known as the mystery of the Circleville Letters, is not just another unsolved story. It is, to this day, one of the most bizarre, paranoid, and devilishly intelligent true crimes ever recorded in the United States. Because unlike many cases that start with a tragedy and end with a mystery, here it was the opposite. The terror came in the mail, and it spread, silent, unforgiving. The letters were written in large letters, all in capital. Letters as if the paper itself screamed. The tone was one of direct confrontation. There were no ransom demands, no specific demands, only threats. Pure, raw, precisely targeted. And they reached everyone. Teachers, policemen, local politicians. No one was immune. An invisible network of surveillance seemed to form over Circleville, as if the town had been taken over by an omnipresent and evil eye. People began to change their routines, installing cameras, locking doors in broad daylight, distrusting their own neighbors. There were no clues, there were no fingerprints, there were no traces, just the growing feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching everything. Someone who knew the city better than anyone, someone from the inside. And then, what was a threat became a reality. A tragedy occurs, an accident, or maybe a murder. What makes this case even more frightening is not only the content of the letters, but the time they lasted. Decades. Even after a suspect was arrested, the letters kept coming. And now the doubt becomes inevitable. Did they arrest the wrong man? Or has there never been a single author? There are those who say that it was all a big conspiracy, others that it was a psychological game taken to the extreme. But there are also those who believe in something more obscure, something that borders on the supernatural, an entity, a curse, an intelligence disguised as paper, capable of destroying lives without ever revealing its face. The truth? Nobody knows. And perhaps that's exactly what makes this story so disturbing, because deep down, everyone has secrets, but only those who observe closely. You can use them as a weapon. And now the question you need to ask yourself is, would you open the next letter? And what was written inside them? It may still be happening now. But before I tell you what really happened in Circleville, you need to understand how this nightmare began. Because from here, nothing was safe anymore. Not even the truth. What no one imagined is that this silent terror was about to cross the line, from threat to act, from paranoia to tragedy. And that's exactly what happened in 1977, when Mary Gillespie, a school bus driver and one of the main targets of the anonymous letters, found her world falling apart. The letters accused her of having an extramarital affair with the town's school superintendent. They did not ask for ransom. They did not demand silence. They told her to confess, that it stopped, let it disappear. Mary denied everything. He said that there was no case, that it was an invention. But the letters came with two intimate details. Details that, if they weren't true, at least seemed to be. And that was enough for his life to become a suffocating psychological game. Each time he opened his mailbox, it wasn't just another letter. It was an attack, a warning, a real threat. Physical, dirty, written with fury and precision. And that escalated. Because the author, or authors, didn't just want to scare. He wanted to destroy. In August of that year, Mary's husband, Ron Gillespie, received a mysterious call. No one knows for sure what was said, but enough for him to grab his gun and drive off at high speed. Moments later, Ron was found dead after his car collided with a tree. The gun was still in the vehicle, but here is the detail that bothers to this day. The bullet had been fired. Who did he shoot? Did you shoot nothing? Did he shoot the author of the letters? Or did someone kill him before and stage an accident? Police treated the death as accidental. He said that Ron was drunk. but the toxicological report was questioned by the family itself. Close friends stated that he did not drink, and the blood alcohol level in the report was too high to make sense. This is where the case starts to get even more disturbing, because it's not just about threatening letters. Now there's a body, a father of a family killed under dubious circumstances, a widow who was the target of the threats, and an author who it seems was watching everything, somewhere, and he didn't stop. The letters continued, more violent, more angry. They began to appear in public places, fixed on poles, left on walls. Some displayed intimate details of residents. Others directly threatened the local police, saying they were covering something up. The tone was almost messianic, as if the author was trying to cleanse the town of Circleville of its sins, as if he were assuming the role of judge, prosecutor, and executor. That's what makes this case different from any other true crime. It feels like a work of fiction, written by a brilliantly sick mind. At one point, Mary was almost killed. While driving her school route, she saw an offensive poster about her daughter on a fence. He stopped the bus, got out, and went to tear down the poster. But behind it was a trap, a device with a pistol ready to fire. The wire was poorly connected, and she was almost shot. That made it clear that the game had changed. It was no longer just about vigilance and dark words. Now it was a clear assassination attempt. Police began to suspect a man named Paul Freshour, Mary's brother-in-law. He had already expressed displeasure with the alleged extramarital affair and had access to the places where the letters circulated. When he was questioned, he confessed nothing, but he was put on trial anyway, based on circumstantial evidence and handwriting similar to that of the letters. Paul was convicted, and then, for a while, it seemed that peace had returned to Circleville. Seemed, because while Paul Freshour was in prison, letters kept being sent, from inside the prison, even with him isolated, even with restricted visits, even with reinforced surveillance. Paul himself began to receive letters, explicit threats, mockery, messages accusing him of crimes he insisted he had not committed. The guard said that he had no way to send mail. There was no paper, there was no pen, and even so, the envelopes kept coming, for everyone, including for TV shows, such as Unsolved Mysteries, which covered the case nationally. Then the question arises that was never answered. If the alleged perpetrator was in prison, who was writing the new letters? Would they be accomplices? Would he be an imitator? Or was the real author never caught? Circleville plunged into an abyss of collective fear. Trust between neighbors evaporated. No one else knew who might be behind the messages. And worse, everyone wondered if they could be the next targets. The letters followed a macabre pattern. They were mechanically composed with capital letters, in a style that mixed fury and coldness, some accompanied by childish and cruel drawings, others with threats that involved children, co-workers, even local pastors. The terror no longer had a face, and that's exactly what made it so effective. The psychology behind it is even more unsettling. The author, whoever he is, created a system of control based on fear. Fear of being watched, fear of being exposed, fear of being punished for sins that many times only those inside your home know. This generated a rare phenomenon in criminal studies: collective paranoia sustained by an invisible criminal, an anonymous vigilante with a paper voice and absolute power over the daily life of an entire city. The most bizarre thing is that, even with the passing of the years, even with Paul Freshour being released in 1994 after years of claiming innocence, the mystery is not over. The FBI even got involved. Private investigators reviewed the files. Forensic analysts studied every comma of the letters. And yet no definitive culprit has been found. No fingerprints, no footage, nothing. Circleville has become a portrait of the inexplicable, a case that begins with handwritten threats and ends with a maze of theories, some plausible, others frighteningly surreal. Theories involving police corruption, family revenges, secret rituals, multiple personalities, even the idea that the author could have been several people, exchanging information with each other to sustain a collective illusion. But the truth remains out of reach. And if there's something that bothers you more than crime, it's the feeling that he's still on the loose. Because if the culprit was never identified, if the letters continued even after arrests, if the threats have spanned decades, so, the inevitable question is this really over? Or Circleville is just silent, waiting for the next letter? With so many unusual elements, the question that began to echo through the alleys, bars, and churches of Circleville was inevitable. Who would have enough power and knowledge to manipulate an entire city with ink and paper? It was no longer about crime. It was about control. And where there is hidden control, there is always room for theories, some frighteningly plausible, others so absurd that they border on the supernatural. But in the case of Circleville, none of them can be ruled out with complete certainty, because when the impossible happens, everything becomes possible. One of the first theories that gained traction was that of a conspiracy involving the local police. This is because, from the beginning, there were glaring flaws in the investigation, ignored testimonies, discarded evidence, contradictions in official reports. Paul Freshour's own prison, for example, was surrounded by obscure spots. The weapon attributed to him as key evidence never had any concrete connection with the letters, and the fact that the threats continued even with him incarcerated suggests that someone was manipulating behind the scenes or protecting the true perpetrator. Some residents claim that the police knew more than they said. Others, who were involved in scandals that could be exposed by the letters. There were rumors about adultery, abuse of power, corruption, and even covert crimes. The kind of thing that, if it came to light, would destroy reputations, and maybe even careers. Was it possible that someone on the inside was using the cards as a way to silence, control, or punish? And more. If the police themselves were involved, how could anyone feel safe? But not everyone believes this explanation. There are those who see the case as a personal vendetta taken to the extreme. A silent vendetta initiated by someone who felt betrayed, humiliated, forgotten. A former friend, a relative, someone rejected who, instead of exploding into direct violence, preferred a cold, handwritten war. And let's face it, is there anything more intimate and perverse than threatening someone with their own truths? The writing of the letters seemed charged with anger, but also with method, as if the author took pleasure in observing the chaos he caused. This aligns with profiles of obsessive stalkers, or people with narcissistic and paranoid traits, people who believe they are taking the law into their own hands, people who feel superior to others because they know what they hide. Now imagine this person living on the same street as you, having lunch at the same restaurant, greeting you in church. The question, who is behind the letters, becomes something more terrifying when you consider that perhaps you have already looked into that person's eyes. What if it's not just one person? This theory is even more disturbing. What if it's a network? A silent group that shares information, an anonymous collective that feeds on gossip, surveillance, and moral hatred. Neighbors, colleagues, even relatives, exchanging letters as a secret pact, a club of fear, a social cult. We are not talking about a traditional religious cult, but about a collective behavior that follows the logic of cults. Punishment for the impure, constant surveillance, and a distorted sense of mission. In this scenario, Circleville becomes a puppet theater, and no one is safe, because anyone can be part of the show. Shows like Unsolved Mysteries have taken a deep dive into this case. An entire episode was devoted to the Circleville Letters, and even with the help of experts, and retired FBI agents, no one has been able to point to a definitive explanation. The mystery remains unsolved, decades later. And the more you try to understand, but he escapes through the cracks of logic. There are also theories that cross the border of the rational, because at some point everything starts to seem too wrong to be just human. The way the letters seem to come out of nowhere, the precision with which they knew intimate details of dozens of people, the permanence of the standard even over the years. There are those who swear that the author was someone with dissociative disorders, multiple personalities, each writing a part of the story. Others, more daring, point to something that goes beyond the psychological, a presence, an entity, an echo of evil that manifests itself through writing. You may think this is exaggerated, but think about it. Evil often does not need a body, only in one way. And if that medium is paper and ink, terror is even more efficient, because the letter doesn't scream, it doesn't run, he does not hide. She just waits for you to open it. And when you open it, it goes in your mind, in your routine, in your fears. Paranormal theorists looked at the case from another angle. They point to the symbolism present in some letters, the specific dates they were sent, the words repeated frequently, as if they were part of a ritual manipulation, as if writing were a form of invocation. Some have linked the phenomenon to residual energies, spiritual obsessions, even the idea that the cards have become a living curse, passed on, generation after generation. Urban legends were born from the case, stories of children who played the postman of terror, people who burned their mail for fear of finding one of the letters among the accounts, families who moved out of the city without giving explanations. An eerie silence seems to hang over Circleville to this day, as if everyone had agreed, without words, not to touch it anymore, to leave the past where it is. not to provoke what you may still be observing. And if you think all this sounds like a movie script, maybe it is. But a film based on true events. A silent, elegant, perverse, and real. That's why this case isn't just an unsolved crime. He is a mirror. A reflection of what happens when fear organizes, educates, and learns to write. Perhaps the author of the letters never existed. Maybe he's a symbol, an archetype of modern horror. Or maybe it's closer than we think. Maybe he never left. Maybe he's reading this right now. Perhaps let him be you, or your neighbor, or the person who just crossed paths with you on the street. The only thing we know for sure is that the mystery continues. And it continues because something in it still pulsates. It still provokes us. It still terrifies us. Now comment below what you think. Do you believe it was an internal conspiracy? Or do you think it was all engineered by a lonely psychopath with a thirst for power? Or do you go further? Do you think there's something supernatural about all this? Write in the comments. I saw the postman, just so we know you've made it this far. And that is still with us. If you already have goosebumps, prepares the heart. Because what comes next will make you question everything you think you know about logic, crime, and reality. And even after all of this, after the threats, after the blood, after the arrest and release, the only certainty that remained is the most disturbing of all. The case was never officially solved. No definitive verdict, no confession, no response that ends the cycle. The author or authors of the Circleville Letters remain, to this day, beyond the reach of justice, free, silent, and, maybe still watching. This is where the line between reality and nightmare begins to blur, because when a crime is solved, no matter how cruel it may have been, there is a kind of closure, an end. But when it remains open, the terror never goes away. He just settles, it hides in routines, blends in with everyday life, until it seems like a normal part of life. But it is not, and it never will be. Imagine you today receiving a letter, no sender, with angry scrawled capital letters. The ink flickered, as if it had been written under pressure, and within it, it's something that only you know, a secret of his, an intimate detail that you have never told anyone, a mistake, a memory, something that gives you goosebumps just remembering it. And the scariest thing, the card says it is watching you. Who knows where you live? Who knows who you are? Would you open this letter? Because that's exactly what hundreds of Circleville residents have experienced, and many of them have never been the same. What bothers me most about this case, and perhaps what makes it so magnetically disturbing, is the sense of closeness. Because it's not about a masked serial killer or a swamp creature. It's about someone like you, like me, someone ordinary, invisible in the light of day, but who knows well the darkness of the human soul. Someone who learned to turn words into weapons. Someone who understood that true terror doesn't need a knife, just paper and silence. And that's exactly why the story of the Circleville case doesn't end. It extends. It whispers in the ear of those who read, watch, think about it before going to sleep. Because with each new detail revealed, a new doubt is born. And each doubt brings you closer to a possibility. The culprit was never caught, because maybe he has never acted alone. Maybe he was just the messenger. The conductor of something bigger, older, darker. There are those who say that the letters were just the beginning of something much bigger, that there were more things hidden in that city, that Circleville was just one of the many points where fear decided to take root, where the inexplicable disguised itself as paranoia, where evil has hidden behind a simple mailbox. By now you may be thinking you've seen it all, that he has heard all possible theories, but the truth is that none of them ends this cycle. No theory gives peace. Because the case is like a puzzle where a piece is always missing. Always. And the missing piece, it could be you. You may be the next to receive the letter, the next victim of doubt, the next name to appear written in large letters on an envelope without a sender. And that, my friend, that is the real terror. Not the blood, not death, but the unknown, the uncontrollable, the invisible. Circleville is just a name, but the fear that was born there no longer has a fixed address. And that's why, if you've made it this far, you need to know one thing. Not all horror is fiction. Some true stories are scarier than any movie, because they don't end when the screen goes dark. They are still in your head, in your mirror, in the sound of your mailbox opening outside, in the noise of paper being folded, in the handwriting that is not yours. If that gave you goosebumps, imagine what's next. Subscribe to the channel now, because this is just the beginning. Here, each video is an invitation to dive deeper into cases that defy logic, the mysteries that the police have given up on, solving, and the crimes that seem like the work of something beyond the human. You don't want to miss out on what's to come, nor will he be able to ignore what has already happened. And if you made it to the end of this video, comment below. The letter is still coming. I want to know who had the courage to face everything so far. Leave the like if that moved you, if it gave you that shiver, if it made you look over your shoulder just now. And it hasn't come out yet. The next video is already appearing there on the screen. Click now, because if there's one thing horror loves the most, that's when you keep watching.